We're going to be looking at productivity, enhancing productivity in service delivery in Nigeria. So we're going to be focusing in private establishments and, of course, public establishments in the country. Now, I love what, okay, let me put it this way. People say they love what the present governor of Edo State is doing in terms of trying to enhance productivity in service delivery as it relates to the public sector in Edo State. We're so privileged this morning to have a rare one. She had to take off her time despite a very tight and busy schedule to grace this program this morning. I'm talking about the Director General of the John Odigye Oyegun Public Service Academy, talking about Ms. Emunwahe Ajono. Madam, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right, so let's try to characterize public service delivery now in Nigeria as it relates to private sector and, of course, the public civil service. How would you want to characterize it?
I think one of the things that, many would agree is lacking in the public sector is really capacity building. Beyond salaries, when people go to work for these private companies, you go in there knowing that if I put 5 years of my career in this company, I'm coming out not just with a hands-on experience, but I'm also coming out with certifications that make me globally competitive. But in the public sector, you're not quite sure what you would get, as opposed to when you work for a good private company. You know that, okay, in the next 5-10 years, I'm going to become some sort of subject matter expert. So beyond the employee value proposition, so to speak, it's not just the salary that you end up earning, but it's also all the other fringe benefits that you're going to get. And that's why we find that oftentimes talent moves to the private sector as opposed to the public.
The sector.
Yes.
Okay. Now, would you want to say that, because some people have the view that perhaps retirement age has to be reduced? I mean, take for example a public servant that has to work for like 35 years of work, or maybe 60 years of age now. Then the person, maybe after service, he wants to go to other things, maybe to continue as a worker and all that. And in that 35 years, he keeps on enhancing himself. So after 35 years of service, or after 60 years of age, does he still have time? Does he still have age?
It's interesting to hear that people are canvassing to reduce retirement age. But if you look at the trend across the world, people are living longer. Yes, in Africa, specifically in Nigeria, we're not quite where the Japanese, for example, or the global north is. But people are living longer. And the argument generally is, should we extend?
You mean people are living longer in terms of age?
People are living longer in terms of age.
Really?
Yes.
When the average
in the global north,
age expectancy in Nigeria is about 65?
No, I wanted to situate it here. So people I was talking about trends globally. So at least in the global north, people are living longer. In the global south, maybe not quite there yet. However, I don't know that the conversation is around should we reduce the retirement age. But question is, if someone is going to live till they're 90, for example, and this person is a subject matter expert, at 60 when they retire, are they really done? For most people, the answer is no. There's also a reason why for a lot of people, when they retire, you find that some people don't live that much longer, because there's a sense of purpose and fulfillment that your work gives you. Waking up every day, having that sense that there's something that needs me that is larger than myself, as opposed to not having something to do. So I think the real thing is building capacity. Whether we have young people, whether we have people who have lived over 60, are they still productive? Are they able to add value to society, whether it's in the public or in the private sector?
Okay, let's turn our attention to Edo State now, with what is going on in the public service in Edo State. Now, we hear that the state governor is really investing. What does he intend to achieve?
I think for someone, and not just someone now, for a governor to have the political will to be able to want to invest in human capacity development, and especially knowing that you might not reap the benefits within your tenure, because a lot of the investment in human capacity development, we're going to see it in the next 5 years, in the next 10, and even longer further down the road. So I think in terms of what the governor wants to achieve is he wants to take Edo back to being a knowledge hub. Often we talk about our history, but underpinning that history, where we're called the ancient city of Benin, etc., is that we were a knowledge hub. When the foreigners came, they did business with us. We were not captured as slaves, right? So it's to say, how do we go back, so to speak, to our foundations, so that we can now start to build? And I think that that's where the whole Make Edo Great Again comes from, is to say that we were great once. You know, we were one of the greatest kingdoms. People often say that the two kingdoms in the world, it's us, and then it's the other one Kingdom, that I would not mention. Oh, well, you did. So it's to take us back to how we were in the beginning. And to do that, you must invest in human capital. It's people who will move machines. It's people who will deliver, you know, the kind of quality governance that our people so desperately seek. So it's so important. And we're very pleased that we have a governor who is focused on not just today, but also tomorrow. Okay.
Now, you hear people say that Edo State is a civil service state. Now, that's probably underscores the mindset, civil service as it were, that we're just talking about an establishment that people carry fire from table to table and all that. And perhaps that also snowballed to the kind of intention that people have with civil service delivery, perhaps in the country. Now, if this is the situation, how are you guys coping with this mindset, with this belief that civil service delivery is bureaucratic in nature, it has to do with carrying files from table to table and all that?
So it's a few things that you've said there, and I'm going to try and unpack it. So the first one is the civil service, the perception of the service as one that is kind of analog, if you like, taking files from place to place. One of the things that we're doing differently in Edo is moving totally 100% to e-governance. You would have heard maybe the head of service, Anthony Okungbawa Esquire, talk about, you know, our e-governance drive. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to move away from that slow bureaucratic process that is very opaque. You know, nobody is quite sure. If I pass a file to you, Evans, you could say that you didn't see the file.
Or I can even hide it.
You could hide it, absolutely. And I have no way of knowing. There is no trail. I have no way of knowing. I have to depend on your pen. And if you don't enter it into that ledger, what happens? But you see, we've moved to e-governance. We use something called eGov in Edo. And that platform is very intuitive. So, for example, if within 48 hours you have not responded to something that was sent on your eGov, the system will prompt you, you know, to say that you have an approval that is pending for you to attend to. So September 1st, we went completely paperless. So if you come to my agency, for example, I don't think you'll find paper anywhere. You know, so that's how we work in Edo. I think that we're really doing things differently. The bureaucracy in itself is not necessarily bad. The other kingdom that you mentioned had how many prime ministers this year? But it didn't collapse.
Two, three.
Good. But it didn't collapse because there is a bureaucratic system that works. What we don't have yet is an efficient bureaucracy that can run as it should. So the bureaucracy is not necessarily the problem. We need it to build institutions. But we need to optimize it. We need to support it to function as it should. Okay.
All right. So I've been to some parastatals in the state now. And I love the way when workers come to work, they have to clock in. And of course, when they close, they have to clock out too. That's part of the service delivery, the e-governance service delivery that you're trying to describe here.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, but the issue I have with that, personal issue that I have with it now, that does not have a widespread now. You know, you could probably find it in one or two public, you know, centers in Edo State and all that. So if we have that situation, I mean, for a government that is so capacity driven, capacity enhancement driven, human capacity enhancement driven. I mean, only very few parastatals have that. How does it intend to achieve that?
So, I mean, because we're racing against time, I understand it when people say things like, why haven't you people done all the X? Why haven't you people done all the Y? But the thing is, if you want to do transformation properly, it must be a phased approach, especially since you don't have infinite resources, right? So you have to phase it. Otherwise, and then again, even with change, it's as someone who studied change management, you find that incremental changes tend to be more long-lasting than something that is so disruptive. So before you introduce people to new technologies, and that's why, you know, my agency exists, it's also important that they're even socialized into it. Because your assumption is that people are going to like what is new. It's not necessarily correct. People are terrified of change. People don't naturally like change,
they
myself included.
Yeah.
They fight back. Yeah. So there's a lot of sensitization that has to go in even before deployment is done, so that the people who are going to own this e-governance process can co-own it. The governor doesn't have to be there policing all of us to make sure that we get things done. You understand why we're moving in this direction, and then you co-own it in such a way that you now become a representative in the governor across all MDAs. So what I would say is, I do know that in Edo we have a 30 years development master plan, right? Okay. And it's not to say
as it relates to service delivery enhancement now.
As it relates to, yes, as it relates to service delivery, as it relates to governance and, you know, planning and things like that. So it's to say that we have started, but just to answer your question directly, it's a phased approach. It's eventually all MDAs will be automated. It's not all automated today, but that's the long-term plan.
All right, so how do, for interested members of the public now, is it automatic? I mean, for the fact that you're a public servant, maybe you get to a certain cadre, then of course you begin to attend courses at your staff training center, or how do you go about it?
That's really a very good question. So it's open to every public servant. So it's not to say that, in fact, we want to be able to onboard you properly into the service when you come in, and offboard you properly when you get to your 35 years or 60, when you are exiting. So your entire career life cycle, you are going to go through training. Your entire career life cycle. What we are even working towards is to tie training now to performance. So I'll give you an example. In the private sector, before you become, in good companies, no, I don't want to generalize, some companies don't do training, but in good companies, before I'm promoted into a managerial role, I'm expected to have supervisory skills. They don't just assume that I can do it because I've spent 3 years in their company.
You would have displayed it.
You would have displayed it, that's number one, and then you will be trained. So you would have gone through some courses. The banks do it, everybody does it. And then you would have done things like presentation skills, because they imagine that now that you're an AGM or now that you're going to be an ED, you're going to be representing the organization a lot more. So your public speaking skills, etc., has to be improved. So there are some competencies that you must have before they say you are an ex-officer, right? That's what we want to do with JUPSA. We're going to link competencies to career progression, to the point where if you say that this person is a permanent secretary, you already know that there's a minimum criteria, if you're a PAM Sec in Edo, of competencies that you must have for you to be able to, you know, function in that role. Or if you say this is a grade level 12 officer, there are skills and competencies that they must have. So it's open to the entire public sector, not some people. Okay.
All right. So governance is all encompassing now. I know we're starting with the public sector, the civil service and all that. What about the private sector? How is the state government trying to bring them on board?
That's a good question too. In terms of the John Odige Oyegun Public Service Academy, often when people come, they look at our facility, the quality of our faculty. The question is always, what's your value proposition, right? How are we different? You know, there's so many training institutions in this country. We're a new entrant, but we've come in very strong. So how are you different? How we are different is our niche is public sector knowledge. We want to be the place you come to where you learn about the Nigerian public service. So for example, you've been newly appointed a minister in this country. We expect that in the next 5 years or 10, you are able to come to say, I've been appointed a minister, I've come from the private sector, I don't understand governance, how does it work? Government as a service. You come to JUPSA and run courses, and you are now able to function in your role. Many private companies have departments like government relations, external relations, who again, private sector people, sometimes it can be frustrating, their jobs. You're talking to government is speaking another language, you're speaking another language. So you come to JUPSA, that's what you come to JUPSA for. You come to JUPSA to learn the rudiments. You come to JUPSA to learn how to interact with government, how to do stakeholder management. So yes, we do have intend to take on private sector clients as well, specifically those that are looking to learn things around public policy, you know, and you know, governance as a service, or relating with government and things like that.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly react to this now. You know, we journalists, we hear a whole lot. And of course, when we have the opportunity to ask questions, we don't take it back. Now, somebody has actually told me that he has gone to the National Institute for Management Studies and all that in Just now.
Yep.
There's no need to want to come to what you have in Edo State. Is there any difference between that and what we have in Edo State now?
That's a good question. And in building JUPSA, we worked with even people from Abson as well. Because for us, we're not trying to build a school that attempts to do everything. And that's why I always like to talk about our niche. And how we are also different is that we are leveraging technology to scale. Yeah. I don't know of another institution in Nigeria, at least, that is using technology the way that we are. No. And in fact, we want to, in the next 5 years of JUPSA, be largely online. So you don't need to travel to Jos or travel to Edo for you to learn at JUPSA. You just log on to our LMS, and wherever in the world that you are, you can access our content. Again, our focus is on public service knowledge. That is JUPSA's niche. And not so many people have defined their niche in the way that we have defined it. And then to also say, we also explore institutional linkages. So we're not trying to do everything by ourselves. I don't know if you've heard that we do have, well, we signed an MOU. You know, they like to tell us that we're MOU people. So I'm going to say that we've signed an MOU with Nextpod, where we're working with them to train our public servants. And that's an American online university. I don't know of any other public service.
Edo civil servants can benefit from this?
Absolutely. They have benefited, is what we're saying. At least 500 of them.
Really?
Yes. And they get certified. So I don't know who else is doing it exactly the way that we have. The recipe that we have works, and it's very different.
Now, you talked about Abson a while ago. What is happening to Abson right now? Is it that JUPSA has taken over Abson? Because basically, Abson is the Administrative Staff College of Nigeria. We had it in Edo State in Benin for some time. But since you guys came up, a little wonder if it's still existing, or the John Odighe Staff Training Center has replaced Abson.
Well, Abson still exists. In terms of the way that we are focused, or we're set up, we're not necessarily entering the market in terms of looking at or considering people as competitors, for example. And we see them all as collaborators, people that we
complementary
can...
now.
Complementary, exactly. Yeah. So we're clear in terms of what our niche is, right? We understand our market. We know what it is that we want to do. The Abson market serves, you know, they've been around for a while, and there's so much that we can learn from them, similar to Jos. But we're different, you know, especially in terms of how we are using EdTech, that's education technology, to kind of change the game. So we're very young, not just young in terms of our startup, we're also young in how we think. So we think that gives us plenty edge.
Okay. Now, with what you have in Edo State, and maybe we've had Abson in Nigeria over the years, but you still find this lopsidedness in attitude, you know, civil service delivery, the attitude towards for civil servants in their job and all that. Now, little wonder, what do you think is really the problem? How can we have your own center, and perhaps we've had Abson over the years, then you still have this nonchalant attitude, this lackadaisical attitude at work, and of course you still have the analog attitude at place of work in Nigeria. What do you think are the issues?
So it's multifaceted. Before I joined the public service, and I'm really grateful for this experience, I say it all the time, I had assumptions that were incorrect, and I'll explain what I mean. There's something called, I alluded to it earlier, an employee value proposition. That is, you know, what value as an employee would I get for working for this employer? There's a reason why some companies, and I'll try not to mention names so I don't do adverts for companies, but there's a reason why some companies, they don't advertise. You almost, you know, you find young people already saying, this is where I want to work from a very young age. Why? Because they have a very strong employee value proposition. You know, if you go work for this company, you're going to earn well. You know that your children are sorted. Everybody is aspirational. And we must, including the civil servant. The civil servant is also aspirational. Somebody was saying yesterday, we were walking through some statistics, and the person said, oh, based on this, your statistics, the civil servant is underemployed. when you earn something that can barely take you home. You know, those are issues. And that's why we're very proud to say in Edo that we have the highest minimum wage. It's important. That joins motivation. So there is that, you know, this very low salaries of the civil servant. And then the question now also becomes, what other benefits are accruable to me if I work for government? You know, especially young people, we need to be able to articulate it. Okay, I know that if I come work for Edo State government, I'm also going to get trained, you know, by experts, similar to what it would be if I went to the private sector. So that's another point up for Edo. What else is there? Oh, I'm going to have access to all of this information, you know, international organizations. I'm going to have, if you like, front row seats on what is happening in Edo. Okay, that's another checkpoint. The private sector will not give me that. And then, of course, I want to give back. You know, I want to serve. Oh, okay, so this working for government gives me that opportunity to be able to serve. You know, you get another point. So we need to, and this is not to say that we shouldn't change the mindset, but I'm saying that you must come first from a place of understanding what the civil servant struggle is, because they are legitimate. And then when you understand that, then you create the antidotes, and then you solve the problem. Okay.
All right. So let's quickly see some areas now in Edo State now. Now, the Edo Best, I don't know if you've heard about it, the Edo Best initiative.
I don't think anybody has not heard about Edo Best in this country.
Now, people say that there are issues coming from that, you know, direction now, in the sense that the teachers for Edo Best, they're having issues in the first place that they didn't have the kind of training that they are asked to train the children with. Little wonder whether these teachers, whether you can also train them in this direction. I'm just trying to put things, you know.
So in terms of training, I mean, I can't comment on those allegations. I wouldn't know, they are just allegations. However, in terms of training, JUPSA's mandate is to train the public service. Okay. And our teachers fall within that mandate. In fact, I know that some principals have come to JUPSA to get, you know, leadership training, etc. So that's definitely part of our plan. They are Edo State workers. They earn one of the best salaries in the country. The Edo State teachers, better than the private sector, if I must add. If you
well, not all the private sector, like my own organization.
No, our teachers. Okay. I'm talking specifically in terms of schools.
All right,
I know that Edo State schools pay better than the private schools in Edo. At least I know that much. Well. So, yes, but back to the point I make, you know, I was going to make in terms of yes, they have access to our training as well.
Okay, all right. So let's quickly now. So you said that your service, your training is open to all civil servants in Edo State.
Absolutely.
Then, of course, for the private sector too, private establishment can also approach
reach out
people
to us, yes,
for training and all that.
Yes.
All right. So what about if ITV try to do so?
That would be great. We'll be very excited to work with you. You know, there's so much that we can do. I mean, think about things around, even as something as simple as maybe a team bonding initiative for your staff. You know, that's something that is always useful. I know that in Nigeria we like to focus on the hard stuff, but sometimes where organizations fail is around soft skills, right? Yeah. People are not communicating properly. You just don't like each other. I'm not saying it's happening here, but it happens in a lot of organizations. So sometimes you just need to be in that environment that engineers trust and things like that for things to move. So there's so much that we can do together. Okay, so we want to say a very big thank you to the Director General of the John Odigye Oyegun Public Service Academy in Edo State here. Talking about Ms. Imuwahe Ajona. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning. All right, thank you so much.